Bible teaches that we should speak the truth in love. Perhaps no modern leader better exemplifies this than Benjamin Solomon Carson. Displaying the wisdom expected from his middle name, Dr. Carson has earned the respect of both sides of the political aisle, and that's no small feat, especially since he served the full length of the Trump administration as the 17th Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Dr. Carson, welcome to the Economic War Room.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you today.
We're so glad you're here. You know, in the War Room, we generally talk about the bad, the good, and the beautiful. It's the opposite of Clint Eastwood. He had the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's start with some of the things that you saw. What problems do you see in America today that might cause a respected neurosurgeon to leave his practice and go into the dirty world of politics?
Well, you know, I really had no intention of going into the world of politics, but in 2013 I was asked to speak at the National Prayer Breakfast, and I had done that in 1997. I said, no one ever does it twice, do they? But some research demonstrated that there was one person who did it twice, and that was Billy Graham. I said, well, that's pretty good company. So I agreed to do it, and after that speech, everybody started saying, you should run for president. And I said, that is the most ridiculous thing. Why would I even think about such a thing? But every place I went, there were people with placards, run, Ben, run. It was just ridiculous. I had 500,000, more than 500,000 petitions in my office. And I finally said, Lord, you know, I have no interest in doing this. But I don't have any of the things that a person who runs for president has. I don't have a Rolodex with all the important names, a big war chest of money, an organization. I don't have any of that stuff, nor do I plan to develop it. So, you know, if you really want me to do this, you're going to have to do all that. Next thing I knew, I had an organization raising more money than the RNC, and it went on from there. But, you know, I began to realize that something dramatic was happening in our country. We were moving away from our foundation and from the...
And not slowly. We were running away from the foundation.
We were heading for the cliff very quickly. So I said, obviously, that's why the Lord wants me and many other people to get involved. You know, this country is upformed by the people. And that means that people have to be involved. They can't be innocent bystanders. They can't cower in the corner and hope that nobody sees them and cancels them. They have to be a part of the equation. We all have to be a part of it.
You know, I think what drove people to literally beg you to run for president was that they saw the same thing, but they also saw in you the character and the history and the American dream embodied. I mean, you really have demonstrated that any individual can, with hard work and study and really change the direction and course of their life.
Absolutely.
And were you starting out, when you were little, did you think, I want to be a brain surgeon? I mean, how do you do that?
I didn't, but I will tell you, I always wanted to be a doctor. I listened to the mission stories in church and Sabbath school, and they frequently featured missionary doctors who seemed like the most noble people on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And I decided when I was 8 years old that I wanted to be a missionary doctor. Now, it changed over the course of time, but it never deviated from medicine. And now, one interesting aside is when I got to medical school, I decided I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. I thought I wanted to be a psychiatrist before that. And everybody thought that was a really strange thing for me to do, because at that point there had only been 8 black neurosurgeons in the world. But, you know, God does not distribute talent based on race.
True.
And, you know, I want young people especially to recognize, don't ever let anybody pigeonhole you, except for God. Let them pigeonhole you.
So when you were growing up, did your parents teach you the Christian principles? You said you were going to Sunday school and church and so forth. Your parents teach you the traditions, the history of America, and all of the things that...
Well, you know, my parents got divorced when I was 8. And my mother had less than a 3rd grade education. And, you know, but she understood the power of education. She worked as a domestic 2 or 3 jobs at a time, cleaning people's houses. But she was also observing while she was cleaning those houses. And she said, why are these people so successful? Why do they live in these beautiful neighborhoods with these beautiful homes? And she concluded that was because they did a lot of reading and studying. They didn't spend all their time sitting around watching TV. So she came home and imposed that on us, my brother and myself, and we were not happy at all. We were very in fact, in today's day, we would have called the social services. But we had to do it. And what an incredible difference that began to make in my life as I started reading about scientists and surgeons and explorers and entrepreneurs. And I started to realize something, and that was that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you is you.
Personal responsibility.
It's not somebody else.
What a great concept.
And it's funny because years later, I grew up in Detroit, Boston, went to college in New Haven, medical school, Ann Arbor, then to Baltimore, all very liberal, left-leaning places. So, I was a liberal, left-leaning Democrat. And then I did something that you're not supposed to do if you're a Democrat. I listened to a Republican.
Oh.
I listened to Ronald Reagan. And I said, he sounds just like my mother. He's saying the same things as my mother, just in a different way. And, it was so important for me because I was seeing so many patients at that time in East Baltimore who were dependent on a system, who were perfectly healthy people. And I said, we have a system that is making people dependent. That's exactly the wrong thing. We should be looking at ways to make people self-sufficient. And I really began to change the way that I thought and did things at that point.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that you did. I mean, you picked up Ronald Reagan. He turned this country back one time. Now it looks like we're in a desperate situation where we're going to have to turn back again. We're heading straight toward the precipice again.
We are. And I'm very hopeful that people will recognize that this is a turning point. We're at the peak right now, and we're going to decide which way are we going to go, left or right. It's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's about America and the American way and standards and something else. And people need to recognize that. Don't be duped into believing anything other than the fact that there are those who want to fundamentally change America into something else. Right now, we were the beacon of freedom and justice and liberty, and they want to change it to, you give the government all control and they'll take care of you from cradle to grave.
Wow. Well, we're going to have to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the solutions, the ways that we can stop that bad direction.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Carson, we talk about the wrong direction and the socialist policies and the dependence and all of the things here in the economic war room. But I'm excited because you've brought some solutions. You've started the American Cornerstone Institute, and it's got some good ideas, the cornerstones. Tell us about what the American Cornerstone Institute is and how it works.
Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. What were those foundational cornerstones that allowed this nation to go from a bunch of ragtag militiamen to the pinnacle of the world in record time? Yeah. And first on the list of those cornerstones was our faith. We had faith in God, and it was that relationship with God that taught us to have relationships with each other. Love your neighbor, forgive people, work together, Judeo-Christian foundational values.
Now you're talking about faith in terms of love, and I'm with you. I'm with you, but that's not the world sees. What the world sees, if you have faith, then you must be a hater. You hate something, or you're against something.
When it's just the opposite, completely the opposite. And of course, when you're dealing with communism and socialism, their goal, of course, is to replace God with government. So that is a key foundational pillar. And then liberty. You know, why did people come to America in the first place? Because they wanted to be free. They wanted to be able to live their life the way they want it without somebody with their foot on their neck telling them everything they could and could not do. Sort of like what we're experiencing with COVID-19 pandemic, but on an even broader scale. And some people say, well, we're still a very free country. Are we? Or do people now stop and say, can I say that? You know, can I do this? That's a real problem. And just because it's not officially imposed by the government doesn't make it less of a problem. If it's imposed by, you know, tech firms and the media, and the government is compliant with it, it's every bit as devastating.
You know, it seems like the only liberty that the left wants us to have are broad sexual promiscuity and the ability to change your body and really to smoke as much drugs as you want or whatever. Those are the liberties that they think are important.
That's correct.
The whole idea of, I want to start a business of my own, or I want to raise my family a certain way, or I want to build a home here, I want to use my property a certain way. Those liberties they deny us, but if we want to get on sex, drugs, and rock and roll, oh, that's okay.
Well, it's very interesting because if you go back and you read some of the writings of, you know, Karl Marx and Lenin and Henry Hay back in the 30s and before that, and they talk about conquering America. And one of the ways to do it was to erode their moral values, erode the family structure, erode their faith in God. Because they knew that as long as we had those things, they had no chance of ever overcoming us.
No, you're right.
And it's interesting that Khrushchev said 60 years ago, your children's grandchildren will live under communism, and we won't have to fire a shot. And what did he know? He knew that all you had to do is gain control of the educational system so you could indoctrinate the kids, gain control of the media so you could spoon feed the population, give them what you want to hear, completely exclude what you didn't want them to hear, to replace God with government, and to create such enormous national debt that you could justify massive taxation and redistribute the wealth and take control.
Yeah. What you're describing are the 45 goals of the Communist Party in America. Dr. Skousen wrote back in the Naked Communists.
Naked Communists, yes.
Exactly. So those are two, faith and liberty. What are the other two?
Well, also community, because, you know, that is the thing that gave us so much power. You know, in the beginning, there were communities all over this country, but in many cases they were separated from everybody else, 50, 100 miles. They had to learn how to work together. You know, if a farmer broke his leg during harvest time, everybody else harvested his crops. They ask about his politics. And, you know, that ability to work together made us into strong communities, made us into strong states, made us into a strong nation. And, you know, now we have a situation that is encouraged by the media and politicians, where that person who was your good neighbor for 20 years and lives across the street from you is now your enemy because they have a different yard sign.
No.
You know, we obviously are not enemies if we have differences of opinion, but we're allowing people to drive that narrative and particularly to divide us on things like race. You see this critical race theory and all this craziness about everybody being a racist and society being a racist. And you probably saw a few weeks ago, even a school that had a fir tree as its emblem. That was wrong because that fir tree reminded them of trees that they hung people from. I mean, just craziness. I mean, pretty soon everybody has to be in a little pod and you can't do anything. It's ridiculous. So obviously we need to fight that very strongly and help us to recognize that we, the American people, are not each other's enemies.
Amen.
The real enemies are those who are trying to divide us.
Good point.
And then life is the other cornerstone. You know, there was a time when we valued and treasured every life, but now, you know, we have less reverence for life from cradle to grave. You know, babies being slaughtered in our society, the homeless, the drug addicts, the mentally ill, just being shoved out of the way as long as they don't get in our way. You know, this is not who we are.
No.
And that's not valuing life. And you know, Jesus died for everybody. Every life was precious. And we need to understand that, because that will drastically change the way that we treat people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and the thing is, we treat life as a commodity to be bought or sold or disposed of.
Exactly.
And we put money over people, and
Right.
that's a very sad thing.
Well, one of the things that we at the Cornerstone Institute do are town halls and roundtables around the country. I found that to be very effective as the HUD secretary. Even going into radical places like San Francisco, you sit down with people on all sides, you put the facts in the middle of the table, and you say, let's talk about this issue based on the facts, not based on your ideology, not based on your politics, but on the basis of the facts. And we made a lot of progress doing that.
Well, that's great. Well, we're going to need to take another break. I love the 4 cornerstones. I think they're important principles. When we come back, we're going to talk about the future and where we can head. Dr. Carson, the American Cornerstone Institute is a new institution. Where do you see it in 10 years? Where do you want to take it?
Well, I hope 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, it is a real foundational pillar of keeping America on the straight and narrow, and helping us to realize that America is not a place. America is an idea. It's an idea about freedom and liberty and justice for everybody. You know, that those words should not just roll off of our tongue when we're saying the Pledge of Allegiance, but liberty and justice for all, but we should really be the kind of place that espouses that and that makes sure that it's a reality. And that's what I want us to do. And I want us not to allow this country to get off the track. You know, we've gotten off the track. We're going to get back on it, and we're going to stay on the track.
So how are you going to do that? What kind of programs are you going to be having?
Well, primarily educational programs, making sure that the people know what's going on. One of the things that we're doing is working with some of the new, social media platforms that are forming, so that we won't have this cancel culture.
I think Mike Lindell's is coming out now, is it?
It is, absolutely. And already on his Lindell.com, TV network, LundaleTV.com. You can see a lot of things that you can't see anywhere else because they immediately take them down because they're trying to filter that information away from people. But Skylab, some of the other ones that are developing right now are going to be there for people to be able to express themselves. And I think there'll be a mass exodus away from the ones that are trying to control everything. So, they better grab everything they can right now because I think...
Well, it's a bad business decision for Facebook and Twitter to offend half of their customer base. Or Major League Baseball with Georgia or Coke. At least 74 million people voted for President Trump, and Coca-Cola is willing to throw away 74 million customers. That sounds like a bad business idea.
It really is. I was on the board of Costco for 16 years, and as you know, they're located in the Seattle area, and the politics was pretty left-wing. I was the token conservative, but Jim Sinegal, the founder and CEO, always said, you can never let politics come into the business because you're going to alienate half your people no matter what you do. That's just stupid business. And unfortunately, we see businesses getting into it stupidly because they're afraid. They're afraid of BLM, they're afraid of other groups that might target them. Where is the courage? Where's the backbone?
But the American people love courage and backbone. Companies that do stand up and say, this is what we believe. We believe in your 4 cornerstone principles.
Right.
Those companies that stand up, they seem to prosper and succeed.
Well, you look at Goya Foods.
Oh, exactly.
They absolutely refused, Mr. Inouye, the CEO, to cater to the left wing. He said, I'm catering to everybody. I'm doing what's fair for everybody. And they tried to boycott them, and instead it resulted in a boycott.
Yeah, but you can find Goya Foods in my pantry. You go in. I don't think I ever tried the brand before, but now we're loyal customers.
And they tried to boycott Mike Lindell and My Pillow, take him out of all the different stores and outlets. His sales went up 5-fold.
That's awesome.
So
that's awesome.
He said, "Yeah, please boycott me. No problem."
So the future, when we first met, you told me about the Little Patriots, and the future of America is our children, literally. Tell us what the Little Patriots are about.
Well, basically, the Little Patriots are sort of like Cub Scouts, but the emphasis is for them to learn true American history, what made this into a great country, to learn about some of our founding documents and why they existed. They're able to recite a lot of these things, just like the Cub Scouts might be able to recite a pledge or a motto. We do the same thing with them, with the emphasis being on this great country. And of course, recognizing that it was Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin who said, give me your young people for 3 or 4 years and I'll have them for life. So we're using that in a positive way, teaching them what it is to be an American. And we want people to understand that there's a reason that you have these people pulling down statues and trying to rename everything and rewriting our history. It's because your history gives you your identity, and your identity gives you your beliefs. And if you can obliterate that, people become very easy to manipulate and very easy to lead. And that's very problematic, and it's not only in our society, but across the world. And you saw that with ISIS. When they would go into a place and conquer, they would destroy all the history, the statues, the museums, everything.
And they also targeted the young people and radicalized the young people.
Exactly. Same thing going on here. And, America was made for an educated populace. People need to read. They need to understand historically what has happened. I even tell people, read books by people like Saul Alinsky.
Rules for Radicals.
Rules for Radicals. So you can see exactly what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that you're targeting young people with history, and that's powerful. Let me tell you, if you don't mind, what we're doing. We're targeting people where it counts in their wallets with money. And we're trying to help people learn to weaponize their money. Because
Amen.
you and I have the same vote as an 18-year-old.
All right.
But the 18-year-old doesn't have the same money that we have.
Right.
So we need to take the resources that we have and use those to help preserve the culture and pass it to the next generation too. And we know Wall Street's gone woke, and so what we're doing is training financial advisors, because the clients don't want all of the woke investing. They don't want ESG. They really want liberty, security, and values, the three things we focus on, which encompass your four principles, your four cornerstones. So our goal is to train 10,000 financial advisors representing $1 trillion of investment capital, so people can...
Boy, that can make a real difference.
It could, and we want to ask if American Cornerstone Institute would work with us, help us, train us to pass that those values on through people's money and investing.
Well, we're on exactly the same wavelength, and I believe in synergy. So yes, we would be absolutely thrilled to work with you.
That'd be great. Okay. Well, Jesus said, if you can't be trusted with unrighteous mammon, who's ever going to trust you with the true riches? We'd love to have American Cornerstone working with us. And I'd love to have you come back where we can talk about what your time was at the Housing and Urban Development.
Absolutely. We had a fantastic time. We have some fantastic people. I always say at HUD we had the ugliest building and the best people.
Yeah. All right, we're going to provide notes from this episode and a link to Dr. Carson's American Cornerstone Institute website, all of it in our economic battle plan. This is a group you need to support. You can get your free copy of our battle plan at economicwarroom.com. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.